Yes, sir. I's Mary Johnson. And Robert, he my baby son, but little Robert, he dead. She said no more than this. She did not sob or cry out. Her eyes glistened with the dull light of someone whose eye sockets are drained, but slowly she bent forward, her gray head bowing toward her knees, as if grief was weighing her to the earth. Nothing in this place moved. No breath of wind shook the yellow berries of the chinaberry tree or the dead green of the cotton. In the west, a mirage lake shimmered in the cotton field like a pool of silver tears. Country people are not afraid to look death in the face. He is a familiar in their lives, especially in the violent jungle of the Delta. They have seen him in the houses drowned by the great river and in the towns splintered by tornadoes. They have seen him in the faces of the young men shot down in a gambling hall or in the guise of an old fellow who came home to die after a hard day's plowing, his body on the cooling board still bent from years stooping over the cotton rows. Miss Johnson raised her head, looked into my face shyly, and then said, "I'm mighty happy that someone came to ask about little Robert. He was a puny baby, but after he could set up, I never had no trouble with him. Always used to be listening to the wind or the chickens clucking in the backyard or me when I be singing around the house. He just loved church, just love it. Don't care how long the meeting lasts, long as they sing every once in a while, little Robert sit on my lap and try to keep time, look like, or hold on to my skirt and sort of jig up and down and laugh and laugh. I never did have no trouble with him until he got big enough to be round with bigger boys and off from home. Then he used to follow all these harp blowers, mandolin and guitar pickers. Sometime he wouldn't come home all night, and whipping never did him no good. First time there'd be somebody picking another guitar, little Robert follow him off. Looked like he was just bent that way and couldn't help himself. And they tell me he played the first guitar he picked up. Never did have to study it, just knew it. I used to cry over him because I knowed he was playing the devil's instruments, but little Robert, he'd show me where I was wrong because he'd sit home and take his little 25-cent harp and blow all these old-fashioned church songs of mine till it was better than a meeting and I'd get happy and shout. He was known to be the best musician here in Tunica County, but the more his name got about, the worse I felt because I knowed he was going to get in trouble. Pretty soon he begun to leave home for a week at a time, but he always brought me some present back. Then he took off to going off for a month at a time. Then he just stayed gone. I knowed something gonna happen to him, I felt it. And sure enough, the word come for me to go to him. First time I ever been off from home, and the last time I'll go till the Lord call me. And Lord have mercy, I found my little boy dying. Some wicked girl or her boyfriend had give him poison, and wasn't no doctor in the world could save him, so they say. When I went in where he at, he'd lain up in bed with his guitar across his breast. As soon as he saw me, he say, "Mama, you all I've been waiting for." Here he say, and he give me his guitar. "Take and hang this thing on the wall, 'cause I done pass all that by. That what got me messed up, Mama. It's the devil's instrument, just like you said, and I don't want it no more." And he died while I was hanging his guitar on the wall. Miss Johnson's skinny little body began to tremble, and she rose to her feet, clasping and unclasping her hands. Her gaze was no longer directed at my face, but over my head. She came down the steps into the yard and began walking up and down as she finished her story, speaking in short hysterical ejaculations, clapping and almost dancing. "I don't want it no more now, Mama. I done put all that by. I your child now, Mama, and the Lord's. Yes, the Lord's child, and don't belong to the devil no more." And he passed that way with his mind on the angels. I know I'm going to meet him over yonder clothed in glory, my little Robert, the Lord's child. Her slim brown feet, the last vestige of her beauty, raised little puffs of dust as she danced about the yard, calling on the Lord and little Robert. She had forgotten me. She was happy. She was shouting, possessed and in ecstasy, and so I left her. Tunica Blues. Son House, Robert Johnson's teacher and mentor in the blues, lived on another plantation a few miles away. He was a handsome, intelligent, sensitive man. By profession, a tractor driver for a huge cotton estate. By preference, a musician. Very modest about his own accomplishments and fulsome in praise of his pupil. Little Robert learned to play quicker than anybody we ever saw around this section. He used to hang around us other fellows at the barrel house when we play a dance, and when we take a break, he'd pick up our instruments and try to play. We'd laugh and hurrah him about it, and he'd sull up and go off in a corner and pout. Just as proud as a peafowl and terrible nervy. So then he went off one day. Say he'd going to Arkansas, and when he come back, he was strutting. Guitar slung around his shoulders and 4 or 5 harmonicas stuck in a great big broad belt round his waist. And that boy could play more blues than e'er one of us. Folks would say he couldn't, but we know, us musicians, that he was the man. What little I know, I taught him, but he put his own sounding in it and sing with it, sing all night. In fact, little Robert added Lonnie Johnson's tricky orchestral style to the licks of Charlie Patton and Blind Lemon that Son House passed on to him. Like other much-recorded New Orleans musicians, Lonnie Johnson had creolized the blues, reorganized their lyrics so that each one told a story and set them to book-learned harmonies. Little Robert played some of Lonnie's sophisticated progressions, but he set his highly ornamented, almost oriental vocal style over them. Son House went on. Bogalusa was his hangout, where one of his girlfriends lived. Bob was a terrible man with the women, like all us guitar players. Son looked at his sweet-faced wife, and they both laughed. And I reckon he got him one too many down there in Louisiana. So this last one, she gin him poison in his coffee, and he died. Wasn't but 21. Even the church folks felt bad about it. I always did think that was funny how him and Blind Lemon died the same way, 'cause he played Blind Lemon's style, but more so, and I reckon if he lived, he would have been a better man, 'cause he wasn't blind. How it come about that he played Lemon's style is this. Little Robert learned from me, and I learned from an old fellow they call Lemon down in Clarksdale, and he was called Lemon because he had learned all Blind Lemon's pieces off the phonograph. Now I felt like shouting. Son House had laid out one of the main lines in the royal lineage of America's great guitar players. Blind Lemon of Dallas to his double in Clarksdale to Son House to Robert Johnson. But isn't there anybody alive who plays this style, I asked. An old boy called Muddy Waters round Clarksdale. He learned from me and little Robert, and they say he getting to be a pretty fair player, that's one, replied Son House. And there's me, but I about done quit. I'm getting to be an old man. How old are you? 39, and I can't run around all weekend and work all week like I used to. Got something else on my mind now but the blues. He laughed and glanced affectionately at his pretty brown-skinned wife sitting opposite. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you one question. Why is it that a white man like you would get in his car and come all the way down here to Mississippi to talk to a fellow like me about the blues? You understand why I'm asking you this? It's not because I want to say something wrong or to hurt your feelings. I realize that, but it's a puzzle to me. I'm used to plowing so many acres a week and saying yes sir and no sir to the boss on the plantation. But for sitting down and talking about my music with some man from college like you, I just never thought about it happening to me. So I want to understand it better. Mr. House really meant it, so I said, history wasn't just made by kings and presidents and people like that. We found out that the people who plow the corn and pick the cotton have had a lot to do with it. My job is to help you get down the history of your own people. That's good, said Son. That's mighty good sounding to me. How it sound to you, hon? His wife gave us both a smile. Soon, Son went and looked out over the cotton fields a long while without saying anything. Then he turned to me. Come on, he said. I want you to meet my boys and we'll try to make some of our music. I don't know where Son took me, down dusty roads, along a railroad track, into the back of an aging country grocery store that smelt of licorice and dill pickles and snuff. There were a jug there what gurgled, and it was so hot that Son House and his buddies stripped to the waist as they played. Of all of my times with the blues, this was the best one. Better than Leadbelly, better than Josh White, Son Terry, and all the rest of them. There was a harmonica player who howled and whined through his instrument like a hound dog on a hot trail. There was a mandolin player who did not pick his instrument delicately, but trailed cascades of blue-silver chords that lit up the harmonica's chase like the hot moonlight of southern midsummer nights. A second guitarist picked bass string obligato to the big country feet that whomped out the rhythm and turned the whole frame building into a huge African drum. At the center of all this was Son House, a man transformed, no longer the quiet, affable person I had met, but possessed by the song as gypsies in Spain are possessed, gone blind with music and poetry. Hitch up my black pony, saddle up my bay mare, he sang, his words conjuring up nights of coupling in the tropical heat of Mississippi. His voice guttural and hoarse with passion, ripping apart the surface of the music like his tractor-driven deep plow ripped apart the wet black earth in the springtime, making the sap of the earth song run, while his powerful, work-hard hands snatched strange chords out of the steel strings the way they had snatched so many tons of cotton out of brown, thorny cotton bolls in the fall. And with him, the sorrow of the blues was not tentative or retiring or ironic. Son's whole body wept, as with eyes closed, the tendons of his powerful neck standing out with the violence of his feeling and his brown face flushing. He sang in an awesome voice, the Death Letter Blues.
I got a letter this morning, I do, reading it red. Say, hurry, hurry, the gal, you love is dead. I got a letter this morning, I say, how you reading it red?
Well, I got a letter this morning, how do you reckon it read? I got a letter this morning, how do you reckon it read? Say, hurry, hurry, 'cause the gal you love is dead. You know, I got my suitcase and I took off down the road. I got my suitcase and I took off down the road. Boys, when I got there, she was laying on a cooling board. I walked up close and I peeped down in her face. I walked up close and I peeped down in her face. You was a good old gal, but you got to lay here to Judgment Day. I folded my arms and I slowly walked away. Folded my arms and I slowly walked away, said, you's a good old gal, but I just can't take your place. And now, said Son, after the bottle had gone around the band, let me sing you about the old-time walking blues. That's when you're bound to leave somebody you don't much want to, but you're gonna go ahead on anyhow. He began to sing with the harmonica, puffing like a wild and sorrowful wind, and the guitar beating out a heart-stopping rhythm like trees being torn up by their roots. I got up this morning feeling round for my shoes. No, by that I got these old walking blues. Said I got up this morning, I was feeling for my shoes. I say, you know, by that I got these walking blues. Oh, the blues ain't nothing but a low-down shaking chill. If you ain't had 'em, I hope you never will. Oh, the blues is a low-down, old shaking chill. When if you ain't had 'em, boys, I hope you never will. The music stopped and Son House opened his eyes and lit a cigarette, but somewhere a deep note was sounding on and on without stopping. We looked at each other in astonishment. I thought that my machine was responsible and I switched it off. The sound continued. Son came out of his trance. That's somebody honking outside, he said. I better go see what the matter. In a minute, the horn stopped and Son was back, looking smaller, the flush of the music gone, his cheek ashen. It's my boss man. You better go talk to him. A white man in khaki work clothes was sitting at the wheel of a pickup truck, his pale face pale with anger and fear. He looked so small, so shrunken after what I had just seen and heard that I almost burst out laughing. He wanted to know what this sweating, ill-kept white stranger was doing in the local barrel house with his best tractor driver. I explained as best I could, but the glory was still on me, and I'm afraid I made a mess of my story. He didn't look at me as I spoke, nor, I believe, hear anything I said. He appeared to be looking at a pinpoint somewhere far down the graveled road ahead. "Well," he said, "when you've got your full of nigger music, come by the house." I held out my hand in a feeble gesture of friendliness, but he ignored it and drove off. Back in the barrel house, we tried another record, but the spirit had gone out of the musicians and they broke off in the middle of the song. I told Son goodbye and drove by the plantation manager's house. "Follow me," he ordered, starting up his truck. "We're going to talk to the sheriff. We've all been told to keep on the lookout for foreign agents." Every county in the South is a small empire with its own autonomous power. This county system of government has the virtue of allowing a small area, a small parcel of votes, the opportunity to shape a local lifestyle, independent of the state and national pattern so often controlled by party politics. A county can vote to be dry when all the surrounding counties are wet, and this means you have to drive over the county line to buy bonded liquor or come to an understanding with the bootleggers, who have, in turn, their own understanding with the local peace officers. In the old days, a county could refuse to participate in the state road building program, and when you hit the county line, you might drive for a tormented hour along a washboard gravel road before your tires began to whisper on the concrete again. At some few county lines in the South, there were signs that read, "Negro, don't let the night catch you in this county, keep moving." These signs might not be the work of the county officials, but since they were stained by time, it was obvious that they had seen them and either approved or feared to take them down. In the South, every county has its own peace officers and its own penal system, the county farm and the chain gang, and some of these have been celebrated in song. One from a roundabout Tunica County runs, "In the South, when you do anything that's wrong, in the South, when you do anything that's wrong, they'll sure put you down on the county farm. They'll put you under a man called Captain Jack. They'll put you under a man called Captain Jack, who'll write his name up and down your back." Since it was obvious that Captain Jack didn't write his autographs with a pen, and since it was also clear from the silent fury in the face of my companion that I had somehow offended the autonomous forces of Tunica County, I felt a bit nervous as the plantation manager and I walked up the steps of the pinnacled and turreted American Gothic County Courthouse. We passed under the brownstone portico and into the cool interior with its familiar odor of brass spittoons, wood oil, disinfectant, stale tobacco, and the county lockup. The components of this latter smell are too unpleasant to enumerate. We'll leave them aside and speak of the chill they produced at the pit of the stomach. As a collector of American folk songs, I knew something of county jails, certain of which have been celebrated from coast to coast. The lice and the bed bugs are as long as a rail. They'll heist their bristles and shake their tails, and it's hard times in the Durant jail. It's hard times, po' boy. I had bailed fiddlers and ballad singers out of such places, and if my nose informed me correctly, I was now headed toward one. It all depended on the sheriff. The familiar lines kept running in my mind. "And here's to the sheriff I like to forgot. He's the worst damn rascal in the whole blame lot. Your pockets he'll pick and your clothes he will sell, and you're bound to get lousy in the Durant jail. It's hard times in the Durant jail. It's hard times, po' boy." My impression of the Tunica County Sheriff is blurred by time and nervousness. He was large, red-faced, with stern, baronial manners. He wore his white Stetson like a crown, and I believe there was a six-shooter on his comfortable hip. He did not appear to have heard of the Library of Congress, nor of my employer, Archibald McLeish, so I explained I came from Texas and was descended from a long line of Southerners with two grandfathers who fought on the right side of the rebellion. He unbent a little. "Well, sir, If you're raised in Texas, you're bound to know that you can't go around on people's plantations associating with their niggers. That's what the trouble is, ain't it, Bill? Glancing at the plantation manager. That's it, Sheriff. I would have minded if he had asked my permission and then got these nigger musicians together down at my shed or something. I just did like the way he seemed to be sneaking in, you know, how we've all been warned to look out. You were just doing your patriotic duty, said the sheriff. See, we've had too much of these northern agitators running around and stirring up trouble, and now our country is at war. We've been told to be on the lookout for Jap agents. I wondered what Jap agents would blow up in Tunica County, but I kept my skepticism to myself. Yes, sir, Sheriff, I understand now. I was just so anxious to get my work done and record this music that I am afraid I forgot my Texas raising, I said. You sure did. You've just been up there in Washington too long. Now I understand that you went up on the gallery of that Johnson woman's house. Down here, when we go to see a nigger, we never go up to the gallery. We stand in the yard and maybe put one foot up on the steps, see? I don't want to get too intimate with them. Yes, sir, I see. A shiver went up my spine. Who had reported me? There had been no one on the road to Miss Johnson's house. It stood by itself in the middle of a cotton field. Yet this sheriff knew exactly what I had done there. Someone had gone to him. Miss Johnson? Sun House? Clearly I had encountered an intelligence system at work here in the Black South. It was like being in a spy movie. And then I hear you also went in one of them barrel houses with 4 or 5 of the roughest niggers in the county. What if one of them had cracked you over the head with a bottle or cut you up with a razor? These Delta niggers will do anything when they get a little white lightning in them. Where would I have been then? In trouble with the whole state of Mississippi. They'd blame me. But I had to go in there to make my records. Well, next time, see to it, you have some police protection when you have to go. Now, we come to something I can't really believe now that you tell me that you were raised in the South. I heard you shook hands with a nigger. Is that so, or is that not so? Oh, no, sir. You know I'd never do a thing like that, I assured him. Why, if my family were to hear of my doing that, I reckon they'd disown me. And they'd be right, wouldn't they, son? Beaming at me with the smile of a good Christian who had established a point in the Gospels. Well, I'm mighty relieved to hear that wasn't so, for I reckon I'd have to hold you for a while just to check up. But I'll take your word for it. Understand, I sympathize with what you're trying to do. There's nobody likes to hear niggers singing as much as I do. You say we've got some talented niggers here in Tunica? You've got some of the finest blues combination I've heard. That's so. Well, we'll have to get them on the radio down in Clarksdale. What's their names? Well, Mr. Sun House is the... I knew I had made a mistake before the words were out of my mouth. The sheriff's red face turned beet color. His eyes narrowed to pinpoints. You call a nigger, mister? He snapped. I don't believe you're from Texas at all. I don't believe you're from Washington either. You're a fake. You're probably an agitator, maybe even a spy. And I'm going to hold you till we can check with the FBI. A big steel jail door opened right off the sheriff's office. Cold, dank air crept in my shirt collar. I don't know what I said then. Memory is kind sometimes. It couldn't have been pretty because when I had finished, the sheriff turned to the plantation manager. What do you think I ought to do, Bill? I'll let him go, Sheriff. He says he's not going to stay in Tunica anyhow. Okay, Bill, since it's your charge, it's really your say-so. Where are you going next, fella? The next county down, Coahoma. Well, I'll just telephone him that you're coming. Sheriff Greek Rice will know how to take care of you. He gave me a thin smile and picked up the telephone. Neither of the men looked around as I left the office.